Hello everybody, I'm Michael Feinstein. Welcome to Conversations in Music with moi. This is my home. This is a room in my home. This is what I call my archive room, even though my archive is rather vast at this point. I've spent so many years collecting things that are important to me. Some people have accused me of being a pack rat or an obsessive collector, and maybe that's true, but my motive in collecting things has always been to preserve them, to save them, because ever since I was a kid, I always had this fascination with the past, and when I'd find a piece of old music or a record, I was curious about where it came from, who wrote the songs, who were these people on the covers of the sheet music. What age was this old record that I had in my hands? I became interested in recording technology and the way that music was distributed. And all of that has come to inform who I am as a person, giving me a sense of history and continuity. And also it gave me a wonderful opportunity to express all of these things through my own music, through interpreting these old songs and taking them and trying to make them fresh for contemporary audiences. Because to me, music is a continuum. Everything that exists today is here because of something that came before it. Most of the great musical artists I've had the opportunity to know and meet have always talked about influences. And it is those influences where they've taken an older or a different musical style and filtered it through their own creative process and created something new. And that is what is ever evolving in the music world. So this room is one that is a reflection of my brain. God help you, you don't want to go into my brain, but I'll show you some of these things before we get to what I want to focus on today, which is The Wizard of Oz and some of the music from The Wizard of Oz. And I'll show you some artifacts that relate to that. But just to show you stuff that's sitting on this table, for example. This is a picture of one of my favorite people on the planet, Rosemary Clooney. This is her husband, her then husband, Jose Ferrer. And I love this picture because it sort of gives you a sense of what their relationship was like. They loved each other a great deal, but also had a contentious relationship, and it is shown in this photo. They had gone to see a performance of Peter Pan with Cyril Richard as the star in the early 1950s, and as they came out of the theater, somebody snapped a picture of them where clearly they were having an unfelicitous moment, and you can see her expression of daggers as she's looking at Joe. And to add to the indignity of this photograph, later they ended up both autographing the thing. So I keep it because it makes me laugh. I adored Rosemary, and Jose Ferrer was an extraordinary man, a Renaissance man, an exquisitely gifted actor, an Oscar-winning film star, a director, a songwriter. So I keep this close. This picture here is of the Page Cavanaugh Trio. It's a caricature done in the late 1940s, and Page is one of my great musical influences who later became a friend. If you've ever seen the movie Romance on the High Seas with Doris Day, he's in it. He accompanies her when she sings Put Him in a Box, Tie Him with a Ribbon, Throw Him in the Deep Blue Sea. And Page was one of those guys who lived well into his late 80s, and you could go see him play at different nightclubs around Los Angeles, and it was the most exciting thing in the world. Romance on the High Seas was not only the first movie that Page Cavanaugh appeared in, but also the first film that Doris Day appeared in, and it also featured Oscar Levant, who made that famous quip at that time, I knew Doris Day before she became a virgin, so that's where that came from. This is the famous Nipper dog, which was the dog that is seen peering into a gramophone horn, which became the logo for RCA Victor Records. There have been many, many reproductions of this little dog, and this is a Nipper bank, not particularly valuable, but I just love the little expression on that guy being an animal lover and a vegan, but that's for another show and another kind of podcast. So let's get to the matter at hand, which is the Wizard of Oz. I don't think there's anyone on the planet who knows culture who doesn't know the Wizard of Oz, and it has become the most beloved and famous movie musical of all time. I think it has even surpassed Singin' in the Rain in popularity. And that is due in no small part to the shimmering presence of Judy Garland and her co-stars, Burt Lahr, Ray Bolger. This movie is one that only gets better with age. And one of the great things about the film is the musical score. The score was written by Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg, and I had the great joy of getting to know both of those guys. I didn't know Arlen very well, but I knew Yip better because Yip Harburg was a classmate of Ira Gershwin. Ira Gershwin was a man for whom I worked for 6 years. I met him when I was 20 years old. Ira was 80 when I met him. That was 1977, and I ended up spending 6 years working for Ira and taking care of his archive. Yip Harburg was Ira's classmate. They went to high school together, and they were seated next to each other because Ira's last name was Gershwin, and Yip Harburg's last name at that time I think was Hochberg. Maybe it had become Harburg, but G and H, so they sat next to each other and became fast friends, discovering a mutual love for Gilbert and Sullivan, among other things. And it was Ira who helped Yip to become a lyricist and encouraged him through his career. Well, Yip Harburg and Harold Arlen were selected to write the score for The Wizard of Oz when it was in its formative stage. When the film was in production, which was 1938, everyone was wondering who was going to get the job of writing the songs for the movie, because it was probably the most desirable musical assignment in Hollywood for a songwriter at that time. Well, Arthur Freed, who was the associate producer of Singin' in the Rain, went to New York and had seen a Broadway review. I think it was 1937, maybe it was still playing in 1938, called Hooray for What? And he saw in this musical review, it was not a book show, but it was a series of musical tableaus, if you will, unrelated in plot. And there was a musical number called In the Shade of the New Apple Tree. And when Freed saw and heard that musical number, he realized that Arlen and Harburg had the lightness that he wanted to bring to the score of The Wizard of Oz. And it's because of that they were hired to write the score. When Jerome Kern, who was the Dean of American Composers, heard from Harold Arlen that he had gotten the job to write The Wizard of Oz, he said, "You got it?" Well, after the movie was released, Harold Arlen gave this presentation copy of the songs from The Wizard of Oz to his best friend, Ira Gershwin. And it contains, it's autographed for one thing, it contains all of the published sheet music, which is wonderful in itself to have. And these drawings are by Al Hirschfeld, who is primarily known for his connection to Broadway and to creating caricatures for the New York Times, but he was also under contract to MGM Studios for many years. And these wonderful drawings were not only featured on the sheet music, but also were part of the marketing that was done for the film, where they created children's stationery, each piece of stationery having different characters on it. And I've never seen an original copy of that stationery, but it is out there. And not incidentally, speaking of the marketing for Wizard of Oz, before the film opened, the powers that be at MGM decided that they were going to do merchandising for this film, which is something that they had never done before with any of their movies. And so they got all of the main performers in the film to sign releases giving them the right to sell merchandising, and none of them ever got a penny for any of that stuff that was sold using their name and likeness. So all the published songs are in the score, of which there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually 6. And then these unpublished sequences, like the Munchkin musical sequence, this is the piano copy that was prepared before it was orchestrated. So this is the way that Harold Arlen conceived it, and it was transcribed from his piano playing by a man named Sam Messenheimer. On the back of the sheet music, you see pictures of E.Y. Harburg and Harold Arlen with an advertisement for the songs from the film. And as I said, this has all of the published selections and unpublished, and it names the different characters that we've come to know, like the three tots. We represent the Lullaby League. Three tough kids. We represent the Lollipop Guild. It's all in here. So Arlen and Harburg really conceived this whole Munchkin musical sequence in its entirety. And at the end of it, tra-la-la-la-la-la-la-la, tra-la-la-la-la, Wicked Witch enters, and boy did she enter. Now, these songs, when they were published, had verses written for them that were not used in the film, nor were these verses meant to be used in the film, but the verses were written to set up the songs as pieces unto themselves. This verse for Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead was later recorded by Barbra Streisand, and a few other people have sung it, but it was not supposed to be in the film. But it's fun to see these little verses and extra things that are in the sheet music that are not in the movie. So it's a fascinating archaeological study, all of that. We're off to see the wizard. But I want to get to, I'm going to come back to this song because there's a whole story about this particular number that is really wonderful. Now, if you look here, you'll see on this copy of If I Only Had a Brain, it's an early printing of the copy because it lists the songs that are published, and the last title is The Jitterbug. Well, of course, The Jitterbug is a song that was cut from the movie. The film footage does not survive except for home movies taken by Harold Arlen on the set. So we get a little glimpse of what that number was about, and the soundtrack exists. But they did publish The Jitterbug because it was in previews of the film rather late. And so it was printed until it was withdrawn from publication. So in the back of the book is a copy of The Jitterbug. So this is one of the rarest pieces of sheet music for sheet music collectors. I don't know how much it's worth, but it's wonderful to have it in this book. So this song, If I Were King of the Forest, has an ending that was cut out of the film. It was recorded. I don't know if it was filmed. And that whole middle section of dialogue for The Cowardly Lion, where Dorothy says, "Your Majesty, if you were king, you'd not be afraid of anything? Not nobody know how." All of that dialogue was written by Yip Harburg. And the reason it suits Bert Lahr so well is that Arlen and Harburg had worked with Bert Lahr on Broadway, and they wrote all of the songs for The Cowardly Lion to order. They wrote it for Bert Lahr and for his characters. So it was a wonderful example of writing special materials specifically for not only the character, but for Bert Lahr, who they knew could do things like, all that stuff. You know, if I were king of the floor, all that stuff. They knew he could do that. And probably when they demonstrated the number for him, they demonstrated those things and worked with him to get him to create that character. So that's this book. Now, there are other artifacts I have from The Wizard of Oz that I want to share with you before we eventually get to the piano. Let's see, let's go over here. Over in this corner here, I have a lot of records that belonged to Judy Garland. Many of these came to me circuitously because of her volatile life. Many things that belonged to her went different ways, went separate ways, and she lost certain things. Certain things she kept through her life, but other things disappeared. These presentation sets with her name on them were ones that belonged at one time to Vincent Minnelli. Judy Garland was married to Vincent Minnelli in the 1940s, and after they were divorced, she evidently left a lot of things at his house, including a bunch of records. This is a presentation copy of a radio program that Judy Garland appeared on. and they would routinely give these sets to the performers. This is a musical dramatization of Babes in Arms, Sunday, November 9th, 1941. The film was made in 1939, but 2 years later they did a radio dramatization. And these are beautiful vinyl pressings of that radio show. So they're wonderful to have, not only as memorabilia, but I transfer them in my studio and digitally preserve all of these things. But getting back to what I was looking for, there's lots of distractions here, sorry. Okay, so let's go over here. These are records relating to Judy Garland. This is what I was looking for. This is a copy of a radio show called Maxwell House Good News, June 29th, 1939. This is a broadcast celebrating the impending release of The Wizard of Oz. This set of records belonged to the composer Harold Arlen. They came from his estate, and this is a letter that accompanied them, sent by Louis K. Sidney, who was the producer of the MGM Good News show and the father of the director, the film director, George Sidney. So this is Harold Arlen's handwriting, right there, Wizard of Oz. It's a very recognizable style. So it is from this set that the broadcast of the MGM Good News Wizard of Oz show has been transferred to CD and has been released a number of times, but this is the original source from which all of those releases have come. So let me play you a little bit of this so you can hear what it sounds like from the original 78 discs. Now, the MGM Good News program was a live show. We are not often accustomed these days to live anything except perhaps streaming, online. But in those days, everything was live. When a record was made, it was a live recording. Radio broadcasts were always live, and if they weren't live, people felt that they were being cheated, and the announcer would say, this is a transcribed broadcast, which meant that it was preserved for later broadcast, put on a record, and later disseminated. But people wanted to hear something live, and if it wasn't live, they would tune out. Okay, so this is a 78 RPM phonograph record. This is a turntable that is set up to play these kinds of records. It has variable speed settings, and I can calibrate it to change the speed because there is no standard speed for these old records. Some of them are at the speed of 78, some of them are 80 RPM, earlier records are 76.59, but sometimes you actually have to tune each record individually with your ear or going to the piano to make sure that you have the right pitch. So let's turn on the preamp. Let's see if we're plugged in here. So you'll be able to hear a little bit of this. Now, this is without any filtering, and obviously the fidelity is not going to be very good, but when you hear something acoustically, it sounds very different from a digital transfer because the waveforms change with all of the technology. And it's wonderful that we have technology to be able to clean things up. But in this case, we're just going to listen to it au naturel. Let's see here. Like that click we'll get rid of if we use digital.
Maxwell House Coffee presents this season's final edition of Good News of 1939.
That sounds a little murky. I'm going to try different stylists, but
The makers of Maxwell House Coffee welcome you to an hour of entertainment brought to you by the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios in Hollywood, with a special list of guest stars from the cast of The Wizard of Oz: Judy Garland, Burt Lauer, and Ray Bolger, Eli Harbour, Harold Arlen, plus the regular Good News gang, Mike Morgan, Fanny Grice and Hanley Stafford, and Meredith Wilson and his orchestra.
okay, so that sounds a little odd to me. So I'm going to remove this stylus, which is a 2.0, and try a larger stylus to see if it fits more easily into the groove and if it affects the sound. I don't know how much you'll be able to hear, but let's see. Let's see. Do you hear the difference? How it's clearer, more defined, sharper. It also brings out the surface noise, but that can be digitally removed.
The makers of Maxwell House Coffee welcome you to an hour of entertainment brought to you by the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studios in Hollywood, with a special list of guest stars from the cast of The Wizard of Oz.
Okay, so there's that, which I'm going to replace here because I want to play you a bit of another record. I'll put these back later. Okay. Let's see here. I'm going to go to this cabinet. This is a child lock on this cabinet. Living in this house in California, things have to be secured because they have to be earthquake proofed. Something that people don't think about in other places. This cabinet is filled with studio production discs. These are all from MGM films, and I've collected them through decades now. And this is the envelope or the plastic folder that contains some discs from The Wizard of Oz. And this is a very rare disc because it is an unused take of Over the Rainbow. Someone wrote Garland, production 1060. It says selected. Actually, this was not a selected take. Faster tempo. They ended up using the slower tempo in the film, and it's dark blue vinyl, and on the back is the logo of the company that pressed the record, American Record Corp of California, Electrical Transcriptions. They were on Romaine Street. I imagine that building is gone, long gone, but there's that. So this is a unique record. What else have I got in here? Okay, this is quite rare. I wrote on the envelope, this might be the only existing copy of this performance, ? This does not exist. This recording does not exist in the archives of recordings that survive from The Wizard of Oz, the pre-recordings that now are owned by Warner Brothers. This is an early unused version of If I Only Had a Brain, that was deleted or unused. They re-recorded it, reorchestrated the entire number, and this one was jettisoned. This record belonged to Judy Garland. It is very, very scratchy, and I'm going to play you a little bit of it, even though it's going to sound like hail coming down because I'm not going to use any of the filtering equipment. But actually, maybe I can. Let's see. All right. Okay, now for one thing, this record is 80 RPM, so we have to change the speed. Let's see what it sounds like without any electronic processing.
1, 2,
No, it's not terrible, but all those clicks will be removed or can be removed. Sounds a little murky. So this is a different orchestration from what was used in the film. Well, another time I will take this record and I will show you how it sounds when it's cleaned up, so you will be able to hear the difference of what technology can do for these classic pieces of musical memorabilia. So now let's take a look at the commercially produced 78 set of The Wizard of Oz, which I have in another room in the lower level of this house. So I'm going to put this away because it's better to put these things away sooner than later. Okay, so we're going to go this way. And this is what I call the Gershwin Gallery, because everything in here relates to George and or Ira Gershwin memorabilia that I've collected through the years, and I'll give you a tour of that some other time. So, back here are shelves with more records everywhere. And where is, okay. So here's the commercially issued Decca Records set of The Wizard of Oz. So let's just take this back to the archive room, I think. This Decca Records set is not the soundtrack of the movie The Wizard of Oz. They did not do soundtrack issues back then. It wasn't until 1946 that MGM Records started issuing their own soundtracks. Judy Garland was under contract to Decca Records, so when The Wizard of Oz came out, Judy Garland made a studio recording for Decca Records of Over the Rainbow, and on the flip side, The Jitterbug, because they obviously didn't know it was going to be cut from the film. But the rest of this Wizard of Oz album is not performed by any of the people who were in the movie The Wizard of Oz, aside from Judy Garland. Now, isn't this beautiful? All of that. Judy Garland, Victor Young, who was the conductor of this Decca Records set, even though he had nothing to do with the MGM film. He was a marvelous Oscar-winning film composer, Yip Harburg, Harold Arlen, and then the story of the movie. I've never looked at it to see if it has a photo of the Jitterbug in it. Actually, this photo here, this is a picture of a sequence that was cut from the movie. After the Wicked Witch is killed, they return to Oz, and there is a reprise of Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and that's what this photo depicts. I don't see a picture of the Jitterbug. Just looking here. No. Okay, so this became a best-selling record. Judy Garland singing Over the Rainbow. This record is not in great shape. You can see how it has graying in the grooves, which means that the heavy stylus has played the record so many times that it has wear on it. But Over the Rainbow, and then on the other side is the Jitterbug, which was cut. And then the rest of the set is arranged and conducted by Victor Young. The Munchkin Land sequence with the choral direction of Ken Darby. If I Only Had a Brain. If I Only Had a Heart, The Merry Old Land of Oz, We're Off to See the Wizard, etc. So that's the Decca Records set. A few years ago, I guess it's actually a little over 1 year ago, I was lucky enough to come across the original orchestration for Over the Rainbow. All of the original MGM orchestrations were destroyed. They were thrown away in around 1969 or 1970 by a man who was head of the studio named James Aubrey, who looked at this world-class music library, the largest music library in the world except for the Library of Congress. It was a fantastic archive at MGM, and he threw away every single MGM film score. And it is a musical holocaust from which we've never recovered, because anytime you hear an MGM song performed where they say it's the original orchestration, it has had to have been reconstructed by somebody, because all the originals were thrown away. except in the case of Over the Rainbow, where a little over a year ago I came across a set of original parts of Over the Rainbow, which had been borrowed from MGM, and because they weren't returned to the studio, they survived. So here it is 80 years later, and I was able to do a new performance of the original orchestration of Over the Rainbow last year when I conducted the Pasadena Pops. So let's go to the piano. This piano, I must tell you, is out of tune. And I would get it tuned, but I've got so much stuff on it. My piano upstairs is in much better shape because I had it tuned recently, but let's see if I can even scoot in here. Because I want to sing for you If I Only Had a Brain. That song, oh boy, I don't know if I can get through with this. Well, you'll hear some resonances that will hopefully add to the charm of the performance. So, If I Only Had a Brain is a song that when it was published, as I mentioned earlier, there were verses that were created just for the sheet music. Well, I discovered a number of years ago that there was an extended verse written for If I Only Had a Brain that I had never recorded because I didn't know it existed. So I am going to sing all of these verses that were published in the sheet music and combine all the different character parts. I'll say one more thing before I actually sing this song, and that is I got the idea to combine the different stanzas of the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion after hearing Yip Harburg perform the song that way in the late 1970s at UCLA. There was a musical review of his songs, and at the end of the program he came out and he sang this number very much the way I'm going to do it for you now, but he introduced it by talking about how these characters were sort of archetypes of the human condition. They represented all the struggles that we go through as mortals and all the yearning that we have. And so Yip was always someone who tried to put tremendous humanity and heart into his songs. And this one, I think, is immortal because of that. Okay, let's see. I've got a cheat sheet here for that verse that I don't really know. Said a scarecrow swinging on a pole to a blackbird sitting on a fence. Oh, the Lord gave me a soul, but forgot to give me common sense. Said the blackbird, well, 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 what in thunder would you do with common sense? Said the scarecrow 'twould be pleasing just to reason out the reason of the witchness and the whiness and the whence. If I had an ounce of common sense, I could while away the hours, conferring with the flowers, consulting with the rain. And my head I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain. I'd unravel every riddle for any individual in trouble or in pain. With the thoughts I'd be thinking, I could be another Lincoln if I only had a brain. Oceans near the shore, I could think of things I never thunk before, and then I'd sit and think some more. I would not be just a nothing, my head all full of stuffing, my heart all full of pain. And perhaps I'd deserve you and be even worse Tin Man rattling his jibs to a straw man sad and weary-eyed. Oh, the Lord gave me tin ribs, but forgot to put a heart inside. Then he banged his hollow chest and cried. When a man's an empty kettle, he should be on his mettle, and yet I'm torn apart. Just because I'm presuming that I could be kind to you, and if I only had a heart, I'd be tender, I'd be gentle, and awful sentimental regarding love and art. I'd be friends with the sparrows and the boy who shoots the arrows if I only had a heart. Picture me a balcony above, a voice sings low. Wherefore art thou, O Romeo? I hear a beat. How sweet. Just to register emotion, jealousy, devotion, and really feel the part. I would stay young and chipper, and I'd lock it with a zipper if I only had a heart. Said a lion, poor neurotic lion, to a miss who listened to him rave. Oh, the Lord made me a lion, but the Lord forgot to make me brave. Then his tail began to curl and wave. Life is sad, believe me, missy, when you're born to be a sissy without the vim and verve. But I could change my habits, never more be scared of rabbits if I only had the nerve. I'm afraid there's no denying I'm just a dandelion, a fate I don't deserve. But I could show my prowess, be a lion, not a mouse, if I only had the nerve. Oh, I'd be in my stride, a king down to the core. Oh, I'd roar the way I never roared before, and then I'd ruff and roar some more. I would show the dinosaurs who's king around the forest, the king they'd better serve. Why, with my regal Caesar, I could be another Caesar if I only had the nerve. I'd be brave as a blizzard, I'd be gentle as a lizard, I'd be clever as a gizzard, if the wizard is a wizard who will serve. Then I'm sure to get a brain, a heart, the nerve. I'll see you next time.